Hello, everyone, and welcome to the San Francisco Writers Conference podcast. Thank you for joining us. My name is Matthew Felix, and today my guests are Colin and Rinee Shah, author and illustrator, respectively, of the new book, Off the Day the Internet Died, a Bedtime Fantasy. Colin has written for TheNewYorker.com, the New York Times Magazine, Outside, Wired, Smithsonian, and many other publications. His work is featured in 2019's Best American Science and Nature Writing, and he has won the Society of Professional Journalists Award for Features and Long-Form Storytelling, as well as 2 Lowell Thomas Awards. He's the author of What to Talk About, What Really Happened to the Class of '93, and Blindsight, which was named one of Amazon's best books for 2011. In 2015, he co-wrote This Is Camino, which was nominated for a James Beard Award. As if he didn't already have enough going on, Chris also publishes 6 Feet of Separation, a free pandemic publication by and for kids, which Dan Rather called, quote, a virtual newspaper for our troubled times. Rinee Shah is a creative director, illustrator, and writer in Brooklyn. Her clients include Apple, the New York Times, Facebook, Fendi, Lenny Letter, O Magazine, Simon & Schuster, and many more. She's created a web series for Spotify, creative directed Snapchat's first global TV campaign, and authored and illustrated the Made Up Words Project, a visual dictionary of made-up language between family and friends. Rinee is also a writer of for San Francisco's legendary sketch comedy troupe, Killing My Lobster, which Comedy Central once called an orgy of comic genius. No orgies here today, but welcome, Chris and Rinee.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you. So Dave Eggers said about the book Off, about your new book, quote, for humanity to stay sane, this must be read like the Bible. So Chris, is it safe to assume that in writing this book, you were sort of hoping to save humanity?
I like humanity. That seems like a worthwhile thing to do.
Okay, good. A lofty goal for sure.
Yeah.
Can you just give people a high level idea of what the book is about?
So Off is a bedtime fantasy in which the internet mysteriously disappears from the world. And after some initial freaking out, humanity finds a new way of existing without it.
Okay.
That's the rough sketch of the book.
Okay. And it's I mean, do you consider this a graphic novel? I mean, it's illustrated. How would you, what's the genre? How would you describe it insofar as the format? Because it's not a novel. So I was kind of wrestling with.
Yeah, I think that we think of it as a picture book for adults and adult-like children.
Okay, cool. That works. A picture book for adult and adult-like children. Okay, so the subject of the book is our relationship with the internet, which is complicated and sometimes problematic. And the reason I was immediately drawn to the book was because of that subject matter. And I just thought, this is brilliant. And I just love that concept of waking up one day and the internet, no longer being there, even though, of course, I mean, all my income would be gone from one day to the next. I mean, there would be complications, but conceptually, I loved that idea. That being said, the book is a humorous one. And a lot of the humor is rooted in the social commentary, and specifically as it relates again to our relationship with the internet. So for you personally, Chris, what is most alarming, particularly as it fueled your desire and your interest in writing this book relative to our relationship with the net?
What's most alarming? I mean, I would say, first of all, I always feel like I need to establish that I don't actually think the internet should disappear. I basically think it shouldn't disappear. I know that a lot of bad things would happen if that were the case.
Right.
But I have a deep ambivalence about it, and I think that ultimately I'm not sure it's a force for good. I think it might be, when you add up everything, I think ultimately it might be making life worse, or maybe a lot worse. But I don't think you can actually just kill it like we do in the book. What's the worst stuff about it? I mean, pull up a chair. Look at this past year alone. The internet almost destroyed our quote unquote democracy. And I mean, look at any conversation that happened about any serious topic on the internet. Every single conversation that you follow on Twitter devolves almost immediately into just this awful nonsensical chaos. I think we all personally, I think there's a lot of loneliness. I think we're more connected, but also more isolated. I think we waste way too much time on the internet. Or we outsource our memories and our sense of self to the internet. I think it screws with the way we meet friends and romantic partners. There's a lot of wonderful stuff on the internet. I have spent time on the internet. I know what's good about it. I just think that it's problematic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rinee, do you have anything to add, your sort of perspective on this? Because I'm presuming if you joined the project, you shared some of the concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like the echo chambers that exist on the internet has made it sort of a dangerous place, especially like around the election and even what happened, on January 6th. It was very much these pockets on the internet that were kind of just fueling each other. And so I definitely think, and then also just, yeah, like when you think about Facebook and like you're sort of connected to these people that like you normally wouldn't be connected to if the internet didn't exist. And it's like, why am I comparing my life to this kid I played soccer with when I was like 12? And, just like these connections that maybe aren't fulfilling and like kind of breed things that aren't necessary. But, on the other hand, like Chris and I connected through the internet, technically. We
Right.
connected with you over the internet. So it's such a double-edged sword. It's hard to say.
Right. Yeah, I don't think any of us are contesting that there's some good that comes with the internet, but like you said, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, there's no way around it. So there were a lot of lines that stood out for me as I was reading the book. There were a few lines that sort of seemed exemplary or just stood out maybe a little bit more that I want to touch on quickly, or not so quickly. So after the internet dies, which I think happens right away, maybe on the first page, the narrator, who's a father, the story seems to revolve around, I guess it seems like it's maybe a single parent family, because I only see the father and two kids, I think, unless I missed something. But anyway, the father's the narrator. It's in first person. And after the internet dies, he says, quote, "All of creation was quiet, but also loud. Why had I not heard such sounds before?" So Chris or Rinee, whichever one, whoever would like to kind of respond to that, what sounds are we talking about, and what experience is he reflecting on there?
I'll take a stab, and then Rinee, if you want to say something smarter, you can do that. I think life outside the internet is both quieter and wilder than what we encounter online. It's stranger out in the real world, even though the internet is full of wonderful strangeness. And yeah, you can tune into a sort of slower, quieter frequency when you log off and go out into the world. And that's what I miss. And I want to be clear, I'm not, I think a lot of people who grumble about the internet are nostalgic, or they're sort of ideological about it, or they're Luddites or whatever. I'm sure I have a little nostalgia for, mixtapes and God knows what else I did in the olden days, but it's not that. I think these are substantive grumbling that I'm making.
Substantive grumblings, fair enough. They seem substantive to me. Rinee, thoughts?
Oh, good.
I took it to mean nature, just like listening to the world around us, which I often forget. Like I live across the street from a park, and I'll often sit in the park and listen to a podcast, which is so ridiculous on certain levels. It's like I'm surrounded by birds and trees and squirrels and other people having conversations, and I'm listening to something and tuning out and not fully in the moment. So I took it to mean finally listening to where we are outside and what the world is doing.
Right. And that was actually the next quote that I was going to read from the book that resonated. You perfectly touched on that, which was Londoners, quote, "Londoners listened to an unfamiliar podcast consisting of their thoughts." So Chris has constantly subjecting ourselves to this influx of information and entertainment distance us sort of from our own thoughts and ideas, do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure what my thoughts are on that.
Because you were just listening to a podcast, so you're too distant from your own thoughts?
Exactly. No, I think it's really alienating. And yeah, I think we have voices in our heads all the time, and we're always reading, we immerse ourselves in this cacophony. It's a lovely cacophony a lot of times. And it's often more fun than going out into nature. I mean, the the irony is that, those of us who are advocating for more time in nature, once you actually do take off your headphones or whatever and step outside, it's a little boring at first. Like if you've gotten gotten used to the thrill of a online quarrel, or the fun of your favorite podcast or whatever it is you're doing online, it's a little like it's a sleepy situation out there at first. You have to readjust to the frequency of nature.
Rinee, any additional thought? I know you already kind of commented on that, but any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I just think about sometimes I'll leave the house and then I'll check my bag and realize I forgot to bring my headphones, and like that moment of panic of like I guess I just have to like think thoughts to myself.
And then like, where do I start? Where do I start with thoughts to myself? No one else is doing it for me. Yeah.
Right.
I have to say, I mean, I'm a hiker, and it always does just kind of blow my mind when I'm in Western Marin or something, and it's just this stunning scenery, and then someone goes by either with their headphones on, or now there's kind of a trend for people just to be playing their music, right? They have those little speakers that they just walk around with. And I'm just like, we're like, people come from all over the world to see this scenery, and the bobcats and the coyotes and the elk and the birds and what the hell are you doing? But I mean, again, I think it does all come to balance, right? Like if I'm commuting, it's nice to listen to a podcast when I'm in the car or when I'm on the bus. So, but the nature thing, that always kind of sends me over the edge. But the last quote then that I'll read that kind of stood out, and like I said, there were a lot, but the last one that I chose, this is a reference to, so the children, it's been a while since the internet has died, and now the children can't sit in front of the screens playing video games all day. And so they're actually playing real games in physical reality outside. And consequently, then the narrator comments, quote, "Feeling now suffused their hearts where once distraction dwelleth." And we'll talk about dwelleth in a second, which I loved. But feeling now suffused their hearts where once distraction dwelleth. So Rinee, thoughts on that? I mean, has the internet cut us off from our feelings, or even reduced our ability to feel, or just be in connection with our feelings? I mean, we talked about our thoughts, but this is kind of a different level.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you can be feeling things, but you can also just keep refreshing Twitter. And so it can distract from really processing what you're feeling. And, when something happens, like, after the election, we had that week where things were sort of like in limbo. I think I was feeling a lot of things, but I was also just in bed refreshing Twitter on my phone. And it was just like glued to the screen, without really asking myself, like, what's going on in my body?
Yeah, or letting yourself go there, right?
Yeah.
Chris, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Rinee said it well. I mean, I think that we get confused about the difference between feeling and reacting. The internet is a very reactive place, and obviously we all had huge reactions to basically every minute of the past year and maybe the past 4 years. It was an insane time, and we were all going nuts in like 18 different ways at once. But I do think that that's not the same as like connecting with a deeper frequency that you might have going on. And sorry to get a little woo-woo about this. I promise I'm a crusty journalist otherwise, but I think there's a divorce between those big reactions that we have all the time, and that the internet is literally designed to provoke. That's how the internet makes its money oftentimes. There's a difference between those reactions and a deeper kind of feeling that it can be hard to access in ourselves, and that we lose touch with. We forget the ways to get there. It can be uncomfortable trying to get there when we take those hikes and we put on our headphones. First of all, I try to be non-judgmental about that. I don't want to be a nature purist, but that, I don't know, that way lies madness. But I do think that it's often because we forget how to get back to those deeper, more interesting feelings we might have going on.
Fair enough. And I admit I am a little judgmental when it comes to people wearing their headphones in Western Marin. But that last quote was about children. I know, Chris, you have children, I believe. I'm not sure, Rinee, if you have children, but and kids play a big part. Obviously, like I said, this is about a family. So, Chris, do you have specific concerns? I mean, I'm sure you do. I guess it's not do you. What are some of your specific concerns related to children and their relationship with the net and just the online, the virtual world?
Yeah, I've got 2 kids. They are born into this world. They're digital natives. They tolerate my, my whimpering about technology, sort of the way you would like tolerate someone's weird food allergy or something. I think it's a little exotic to them, and they just sort of roll their eyes. Yeah, I worry about them. I also think that people from their generation, in some ways, are better equipped to manage and regulate. But yeah, I think I would worry about their capacity to be bored, or rather their inability to be bored and to sit with that boredom and to let things grow out of that boredom. And and I also just worry about always seeing how, like Rinee said earlier, seeing what your classmate is up to, or seeing what some friend is up to. That's a really warping thing to do, I think, because you can't help but compare yourself to someone that you see on social media or whatever, and they're always doing something better, or their hair looks better or whatever. I don't want my kids or any other kids having to um, experience that on a sustained basis. I think
Right.
that's scary.
Right. Especially because their hair looks better because they took 20 shots in the right light and then they filtered it, and on and on and on. Right. Because it's not necessarily reality that we're seeing through in these social media platforms. Rinee, do you have any thoughts on that and the relationship between the net and younger
Yeah,
generations?
I don't have kids, but I imagine it must be really difficult. Like I sometimes think about, like, when we grew up, if someone saw a photo of us, it's because like we got a photo taken, developed, and then like maybe we handed it out or something, or like they saw us in the yearbook. But now with Instagram, it's like this constant evaluation of the image that you're projecting and the image that like you really are. And yeah, I worry about that. And the boredom thing, I think, is also like a concern. Like I was bored a lot as a kid, and I, sort of made up these little worlds, and I was drawing a lot. And I think the boredom was important. And sometimes I have to remind myself as an adult, like I can shut everything off and be a little bored, and maybe that'll lead to some idea for a project or something. But sometimes it's hard to do that because it's like, well, I'll just watch something or listen to a podcast or, spend some time on Instagram. But like when you slow down, I think is when you start to really like churn on ideas.
Right. That boredom can feed your creativity or just create a space for the creativity. Right. I mean, I tend to think of boredom as a lack of imagination. Right. I mean, and I'm not saying I never get bored. I'm not saying, but I don't really that often. And I think that's why if we take that space and like you said, if I'm constantly being if Facebook and Instagram, and then I'm not going to have that space. My imagination isn't necessarily going to kick in. So boredom, yeah, I think can be a good thing. And yeah, and as a kid, lots of boredom. I remember, God, Mom, I'm so bored. But yeah, it's like, I mean, do kids even say that anymore? I don't know, because they've got so much stimulus. So one thing we've already kind of danced around this a little bit, but I did want to bring up anyway more explicitly, which is this glaring irony that we're finding issues with not only the internet, but even specifically with podcasts, which we just talked about a second ago. We're on a podcast, it's going to be broadcast across the internet. So, and we've already said that we recognize that there's, it's a double-edged sword, like Rinee said. But any thoughts on how we find, both as adults and relative to children, how we find that middle ground relative to our relationship with the net and social media and all of that? Rinee, do you have any thoughts on that, finding that middle ground?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't think I've found that middle ground very well. Um, and like to Chris's point, the last 4 years has kind of been like this constant like panic mode where there was something always going on, and it was always outrageous and upsetting, and it felt harder to step away from it. I feel like since Trump has been out of office, it's been a little bit easier to kind of take space. Like I've noticed my weekly screen time has decreased substantially actually in the last couple of weeks. So, and I also think it's good to take breaks. Sometimes I'll delete Instagram off my phone and I just won't have it for weeks at a time. And it's like I have to kind of get it all back down, and then I can start rationing it back up,
Chris, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of serious books more serious about this topic than ours that have all kinds of ideas about this, and I think we all know these ideas at this point. This is not a new concern. Leave your phone in another room when you go to sleep. Pick an hour a day or however much time to unplug, take walks, all these things. We know this. This is not year one of living with the internet. These are all things that we know, and we make our vows and then we forget and then we try again. I'm not optimistic that we can somehow like unhitch ourselves in any sustained way from the internet. This is where things are, and this is where it's going to be. My hope, and I think my hope with this funny book, my sort of serious hope deep inside the funniness, is that we can at least remember to do other things. It's not so much like turning the internet off. I mean, maybe we do, maybe we don't. That would be nice. But that we keep these other parts of ourselves limber. And so I feel like, because we need that dopamine hit, we're addicted at this point. So you can't just expect yourself to unplug and then sit there and feel like that's just as fun, because it's not. So I feel like, my little plan is to, I've been talking to a lot of people over the last few months about what they do when there is no internet. What are the fun things they do, or what do they wish they were doing? And just encouraging myself and anyone who wants to hear me talk about it to do that, so that you are replacing the sort of thrill or buzz of the internet with something that you actually like. For me, I've been playing more music lately, which is something I had not been doing for a long time because I was distracted by the internet, or because internet culture became work culture and we were working all the time. So just reminding myself to play music a little more, that's been nice. And it's not going to fundamentally change my relationship to the internet, but it might help change my relationship to me, or at least that's my crackpot theory.
And is the music in question perhaps banjo?
Some of that.
Is that
Is
what
there
I'm
a
seeing?
banjo
I think I
behind me?
see a banjo
Yeah.
behind you, don't I? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, cool. Rinee, along kind of those lines of, Chris made a good point. I mean, we're not all of a sudden going to be able to unplug the internet. We're not all of a sudden going to have this revelation where the internet is bad and so we're done with it. But do you think, are we falling further into the abyss? Do you think we've reached some sort of stable place in our relationship with it? Because it does seem it is always creeping up on us. I like the dopamine. While we've been talking today, I've already liked several posts, and I've already taken delight in people liking my posts. Because I just can't escape that dopamine rush. But any thoughts on whether it's getting worse, or we think it's stabilized, or where we think it's headed?
Wait, you've liked Instagram posts?
I'm kidding. No, I was just joking about it is. When we're addicted to the dopamine, right? But no, I haven't actually done that. I was kidding.
I would have been really impressed if you had done that.
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah, I wish you had done that.
Yeah.
Well, I can get online. Actually, no. Actually, I get online on my Mac, and I'm on my podcast. So sorry, but I'll like a whole bunch of your guys' posts after today's talk.
Sounds good.
Yeah, definitely.
I have this sounds sort of bleak, but it feels like in the last couple of years, we're kind of retreating to like different corners of the internet and becoming kind of these like echo chambers. And it feels like, even what happened after January 6th, where like, a lot of these people got kicked off certain platforms and now they're on different platforms where no one can really see what they're doing. And I don't know, I kind of worry that everyone's going to find their corner and then just stay in that corner, versus being open to a variety of opinions.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
Yeah. So another sort of catch-22. So we're talking about how the internet's a double-edged sword. And this is almost a bit of an aside, but I'm just curious because I think it's an important question as writers and readers. You have a little bit of commentary. It's just one line about bookstores in the book. And this is after the internet has been dead for quite a while. And you say, bookstores flourished and letter writing flourished. So I'm wondering, and of course the bookstores flourished because the internet's dead. How do we as readers and writers, again, how do we navigate this love-hate relationship with online retailers, particularly this behemoth that we deal with, that we need, but we also want to support the indie bookstores? How do we navigate that? Chris, any thoughts on that?
Go to your damn local bookstore a lot. I don't know. I mean, there are places like bookshop.org, which are great and complicated. Yeah, I use the behemoth sometimes. I'm sorry to say. I shouldn't. There's no excuse for it, but I don't know. I think that we need to. I guess my slightly longer answer is maybe if we are getting out of the house more and talking more in real life and reconnecting on those other frequencies that we've talked about, I don't know, maybe that puts you in more of a community mindset and makes your local bookstore or your local whatever store less of an abstraction in your mind and more of a real thing that you actually have like a fire under you to support.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, short answer, I think we just got to do that. We got to like be mindful of our responsibilities as consumers and in this case as readers and writers. Got to support those places. It's
Right.
not complicated.
Right. Rinee, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's sort of like balancing like convenience over, what's good for the community. And, maybe saying like, it's okay if I don't get next day delivery and I take the time to like walk down to the bookstore and get it and pay a little bit more, and just being more mindful of that.
Yeah, this whole next day delivery thing. I mean, people talk about addiction. I mean, and I get it. I get it. We love convenience. Who doesn't love convenience? But I think but to Chris's point, I mean, if I live someplace where the bookstore is down the street, then, and again, it's been tricky during COVID and things, although now they're open again, knock on wood, that stays the case. But okay, so thank you for that. Let's change gears completely, because one thing that was really interesting to me when I saw your book and was thinking about, and I was planning my program and stuff, planning the podcast, was just this idea of collaboration, right? A writer and an illustrator coming together to create something together. Other than with book covers, I haven't really done, that sort of collaboration. And obviously illustrating a book is much more beyond, working with someone on a book cover, for example. So how did you guys, maybe Rinee, when and how did you kind of get involved in this project?
Yeah, I got involved after Chris had written it and after he had been showing it around a little bit. My lit agent, Monica, had known that I had been wanting to do another book for a little while. And she works at Chris's agent. And she sent me, I think, a Word doc of Chris's manuscript and said, they're looking for an illustrator. Would you be interested? And like right away, I was like, this is hilarious and so weird and different than anything I'd ever read. And so that's how I came on board. And initially we did, I think, 2 sample spreads and then a sample book cover. And so, Chris and I, we had never met in person at that point, but we were just working on like, well, what do we want it to sort of feel like? And, that kind of thing just for the sample. So I think that was the initial collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, that's cool. I just assumed you guys knew each other and Chris reached out. And so that's really interesting that you didn't even know each other and that you came together as you came together. So I want to talk to you, you specifically, Rinee, about this process. So I've designed a few book covers. I designed a couple. So I have 3 books. I designed 2 of my covers. And some of my clients, because I also market and edit and publish books for other writers, some of my own clients started asking me to do their covers. And so now I'm doing that once in a while. But for me, initially, the process was really daunting because I know that I could design my own covers because I know what I want and I can render that. I can create an image because it's in my head. But this notion of taking something abstract that in this case is in, say, Chris's head, even though I'm talking in general terms, and turning that into something tangible that not only looks good, but actually resonates with the author, or if you're doing a creative design project of some other medium, the author or just the project, whoever's instigating that project. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how you take someone else's vision and turn it into something, render it into something tangible that works for them? It just seems kind of alchemical and kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got lucky that Chris liked what I was doing like right away. It didn't take that long to get there, which I felt like, yeah, it was like a easy collaborative process. Trying to think what else. Like there's obviously like the biblical feel to the book. And I didn't grow up religious or anything. And so I remember sitting in a coffee shop and I was looking at biblical imagery and just thinking like, what does everyone else think I'm doing? Because I'm looking up like Jesus photo, renderings. So, it was kind of a process to be like, oh, there's like a motif of angels, like maybe that could work, or like the way that they have sort of the halos around their head, like how do we do something like that? And so trying to infuse the right amount of those religious references without it feeling too heavy and dragging everything down, you know?
Mm-hmm. So in general, not specific to off, when let's say you're engaging a client as an illustrator, as a creative director, how do you figure out what they want? How do you, again, get that sort of abstract thing that's in their head and get a sense for what they want?
I mean, it's like a lot of conversations of, give me a visual reference of what, what you've been liking. I think I've been really lucky that I'm at the point in my career where clients come to me and say, we just want it the way you would draw it,
Uh-huh.
which has been super nice. It's sort of like the dream, right? Because yeah, I'll just draw it the way I think it should be. And then hopefully we can kind of start circling in on what needs to be tweaked to get it to where they need it to be. But initially, like the asks have been like, we like your style, draw it in your style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's.
But also, Rinee now starts each day by reading the Bible for 5 hours every morning, and I think that's been really helpful.
I've converted, yeah.
Well, she quoted quite a few verses before we went on air, which I thought was, it really got us started off in a very grounded, centered place.
Right,
So I appreciated that. So Chris, how did you communicate? I mean, did you have a sense in your mind? I mean, you must have, as you're writing the book, we can't help but visualize, right? I mean, I guess there's different degrees of how visual people are, but I'm assuming you had some sort of visual, or did you not? And did you just say, look, Rinee, this isn't my specialty, it's yours, run with it and let me know what you come up with? How did you kind of work on your side of the collaboration?
I think I had vibes in my head. I don't think I had visuals, but whatever I thought I wanted, this is going to sound like I'm just I'm just being real nice, but this is the case. Whatever I thought I wanted, Rinee was doing that, but then also like eight other things that I didn't even know the book needed. So like I knew that I wanted it to be funny and strange and a little otherworldly, I guess. But what Rinee knew was like not only how to be funny and strange and otherworldly, but also how to have a light touch with that stuff, how not to be overly wacky. There's like all these things that I didn't even know you had to think about when you're illustrating and when you're sort of creating this visual world, that she just like right off the bat, just is, I think it's just instinctual for her, I guess.
Right.
But so it's just like she just sort of knew what it needed.
It sounds as if, in addition to some biblical support, she was also maybe doing some channeling or some black magic, some sort of intuitive insight.
Yeah, a higher voice really spoke to me.
Yes. Okay. Well, that makes sense for this book, right?
Yeah.
So just one last question, Rinee. So for writers and illustrators, let's say it's my first book and I do want to have illustrations, or maybe it's just about my cover and I've never worked with an illustrator before. What sort of advice would you give writers and or illustrators who are just getting started about how to make that collaboration work?
Yeah, I mean, I think having the right amount of opinion, right? Like you should have an opinion about what you envisioned, but don't be so locked into a box where the illustrator has a hard time nailing exactly what you wanted. I think when Chris and I talked, he had mentioned that he wanted it to feel lush, and like that I could like pick up right away and be like, okay, I know exactly what you mean by that, and I'm gonna like definitely. And so there's a lot of greenery and off. That I think came directly from that conversation. So I think just having an open mind, but having enough of an opinion where the illustrator has some jumping off point for where they need to go,
Great. Chris, any insight from your side of the table with regards to any advice you might offer about collaboration?
Yeah, it's funny, Rinee, I'd forgotten about our lush conversation. Yeah, I think, it was a real learning experience for me. I probably did a million things wrong. You can tell me later, Rinee. But I assume that like the way a writer should handle him or herself is like having ideas, being able to articulate them, but not being married to specific things, because that doesn't help. I think being able to describe the vibe you're looking for, and then also to not be so sure of certain things. Am I making any sense, Rinee? Am I saying the right thing that a writer should say?
Yeah, I think that's right. And, for me, like, I was most intimidated by the idea that I would have to create this cohesive visual world. I've never had to do that before. And so to me, it was really intimidating. And so I was happy that it turned out to be actually sort of natural and easy in a way.
Love
But,
that.
it was taking certain motifs of like, okay, I'm always doing greenery or, it
Hangers.
actually, yeah. And it actually helped that all the characters were in these like religious robes. And so it was easy to draw their bodies. I was like worried about that. But I kind of just had to draw like this lumpy shape around them.
Right. No
Yeah.
body image issues or like worrying about the specifics of all that, the implications of all that. Okay, let's talk about Saved by the Bell. So is it safe to assume that since this book is coming out, I think just months after the Saved by the Bell reboot, that like that's not a coincidence, Chris?
Yeah, we caused that. We orchestrated that.
Did you orchestrate
that? Was
that?
The hardest part of this book was reuniting the cast from Saved by the Bell. It was a lot of phone calls, a lot of long emotional lunches.
That's
hard.
huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
A lot of time in LA, I would guess. Okay, but one of the questions you posit then about the Saved by the Bell cast is, are they still hot? I mean, that's one of the big questions in this book. And now that we have the reboot, we've seen them. And so, Rinee and Chris, I'm just curious, like, do we feel like they're still hot? Is there anyone who maybe stands out?
I mean, I think Mario Lopez has not aged a day. I don't know what he's doing. His skincare regime is fantastic. So.
And I'm pretty sure he's still got 6-pack abs. So between the skincare and the crunches, Mario's doing well. And to be honest, he's the only one whose name I even know in the cast. Chris, is there anyone who stands out for you?
I didn't actually watch that show. I mean, I know the person you're talking about. If you said all the names, I guess I would know them just because it trickled into my head. But okay. I don't actually know anything.
Okay, you don't know anything, but you put that in the book, though, right?
Yeah, I was drinking a lot at the time. I was
drinking a lot.
Really, yeah.
Okay. All right. Nice out. Okay. So why humor? So we've talked about the book is funny but we haven't talked about, Chris, why you decided to approach it. You've written for all these magazines. You could have taken a journalistic approach. You could have written a serious article about this. Why did you choose humor?
I think a couple of reasons. One, I had just finished a pretty intense, serious piece of journalism, a story I'd been reporting for much of 2019, 18. I can't. Forgot how time works now. A big profile that was intense, and I wanted my next project to be light and funny. But I also, I think that I think we're all tired of being scolded by people about our internet habits. I mean, even our phones scold us now because we're on our phones too much. I don't think that helps. It's boring, it's tedious. And at the same time, I am troubled by, all these things that we've been discussing about our relationship with the internet. So I felt like if we could create a Trojan horse for some of these more serious questions and conversations that we should be looking at, but hidden in a funny, silly book with like fart and pee in it, then maybe that will be more effective than just like lecturing people about turning their phones off.
And to be specific, we're talking about farting squirrels, I think, and peeing jays, or maybe vice versa. Just to get specific there about the farting and the peeing. But so I wrote a humor collection, and as I was writing it, fellow writers repeatedly just sort of anecdotally said, well, writing humor is really hard. So I'm curious, from a sort of craft perspective, how did you find writing humor different from your normal writing style? And was it difficult to transition into that, or did you just kind of do it? How did you make that transition?
I think when I do serious journalism, I try to make it a little bit funny on occasion at the edges when appropriate. I don't know why. That's just sort of how it happens. But so yeah, I think that it was something that I'm drawn to do anyways. And then once I started writing in biblical style, the Bible's a very funny book. People don't talk about it that way enough, but it's pretty funny. So once I started doing that, then I guess it clicked.
Mm-hmm. So why the biblical voice? Where did that come from? And the biblical theme?
I don't know. I mean, partly I just thought it was funny, but I think that what the book is proposing is a pretty foundational reset, like a kind of a regenesis. You know, we're restarting the rules of humanity, basically, and that, I guess, that just sort of suggested a biblical take.
Okay. And so let's talk a little bit about actually writing humor, because I'm kind of curious your thoughts on this beyond what I just asked relative to, like, transitioning and why you chose it. So you've got pop culture references like Saved by the Bell, which of course not expecting to see that in this context was hilarious. You've got extreme dog fail. So you've got those pop culture references that come out of nowhere and it's funny. You've got some fun plays on words. You've got the biblical themes and the language, which is fun and funny. Any other thoughts? And you might not have any because, but I'm going to ask anyway. Any other thoughts on writing humor in so far as there are certain techniques and certain things we can do, like what I just mentioned. But then I'm also wondering, is it mostly though just sort of an innate, do you just kind of do it, or is there more of a process behind being funny with the written word?
My totally unfunny answer, and my serious, earnest answer, is that I don't know. I mean, I've taught writing classes in the past, and whenever the question of writing humor comes up, I don't know the answer. I mean, people are funny or they're not funny, and I don't know if there is a way to know how to do it. And when you when you're not funny, it's, who's going to tell you? You don't even know if you're funny or not funny. I don't know. I have no idea.
That was another
so
one of the questions. That was another. How do we even know? Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a sticky wicket, because your loved ones are not going to say you're not funny. So you just sort of are like groping around in the world, hoping that you're not making like a boob of yourself. But I really don't know. I think that, and then of course it's subjective. You might be perfectly funny to this group over here, and then these other people might think it's terrible, which, in fact, that is the case. That is always the case. So
Because
I
it's
don't
so
know.
subjective. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I mentioned to you guys when we were corresponding before today was that when I went back to the book, as I read it when you first sent it to me, and then that was a few months ago. So then I read it again when I started to prepare for today, and that was a few days ago. And then leading up to today, I read it again. And each time I laughed. And so for me, whether it's somebody else's work or it's my own work, like I know, because I'm my own toughest critic. So when I'm writing humor, if I think it's funny, someone else is probably going to think it's funny. Maybe that's just one other person, but at least someone's probably going to think it. But then if I go back and reread something that I've written of my own, and I still think it's funny, then I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. If I'm still thinking it's funny, it's probably funny. And it was the same. That was, again, my experience with your book. Every time I went back, I still thought it was funny. And I'm like, no, this is good. For me, that's just kind of, it's a weird, it's sort of abstract barometer, but that's one way personally that I feel relatively confident. But like you said, my mom's going to tell me it's funny. So it's hard. And it is so subjective, right? I'm really ironic. Some people don't, and sarcastic. Some people don't like that. So it's finding your audience and all of that. Rinee, how did you use, staying with this theme of humor, how did you sort of meet up with Chris's humor and then use the imagery to facilitate that? Because, well, there's one thing you did, but I'm going to let you answer that. And then I'm going to bring up something you did that I thought was really funny that you did with the imagery. But just how did you approach that?
I mean, I personally sort of have a whimsical style to my illustration anyway. Like often when people hire me for gigs and it's always weird to have people describe your own work to you, but the word that comes up a lot is like whimsy or whimsical. And so that already felt like a good fit for Chris's writing. I wasn't an illustrator that just draws like birds or like, just like very serious things. I was already kind of coming from a place where my stuff's kind of silly in a certain way already. And then I think it was just finding that balance of like, if we're going to add like religious imagery, like how do we keep it light in other ways? Like, if there's a clothesline with t-shirts, like what like silly little Easter egg can I put on the t-shirt? Or like if there's a mug on the kitchen counter, like what does the mug say? And just really thinking through those details of how can I kind of add in like this visual intrigue that maybe you see something the next time that you didn't see the first time.
You had me at taco. And yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that with regard to the specific technique that I was thinking that I had noticed you had done that really added humor to the storyline that was already funny, which was, as I revisited the book, yeah, I would notice something else, because each illustration, there is so much going on. There's a lot of movement in the images, first of all, but then there are little things that you might not notice the first time because you're reading the story and you're looking at the image, but you're not necessarily diving in as deeply as you do when you go back. So yeah, I loved the layers, and I loved that you put in those little things that then I'd go back and the second time it's like, oh, that's funny, I missed that the first time. So yeah, clearly an approach that worked. So the book is hilarious. It's insightful. I believe it's coming out on March 4th in the UK and March 23rd in the US. Is that still the case? Is that current information?
That's current information. Yeah, you have the best information.
Okay. All right. I try to stay on top of that. Thanks to the internet, I'm able to stay current. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Rinee. Like I said, I loved the book. Everyone else, I think, well, not everyone, because it's subjective. A lot of people are going to love this book. So thanks for sharing it with us. Thanks for talking to me about it today. Let me give everyone your email, your website. So Chris is at chriscolin.com. That's one L. Rinee is at rineeshah.com, and I'm going to spell that RINEESHAH.com. So check out both of their websites for more information about Off. Again, the book is Off, The Day the Internet Died, a bedtime fantasy, out March 4th in the UK, March 23 in the United States. Chris, thank you. Rinee, thank you. My name is Matthew Felix. This has been the San Francisco Writers Conference podcast. I'm at MatthewFelix.com. The conference is at sfwriters.org. Thanks again for listening and watching.